This might kill my laptop. Hi friends, it's Claire and today I'm going to be ranking the books that I've read in 2020. My reading goal in 2020 was to read 40 books. That was the start of the year and that was ambitious for me. I have almost doubled that, which I am so happy about. Obviously there's no way that past Claire, like 2019 Claire, could have predicted how this year was going to go, but at least I got a lot of reading done. The books that I'm going to be ranking are the new books that I've read in 2020. So not necessarily 2020 releases, but books that I had not read in the past, because I did do a lot of rereading, especially at the start of this year. I opened my year up with a reread of Harry Potter. Almost 2 years ago now, I reread the Cassandra Clare collection, but I didn't reread The Infernal Devices because I wanted to wait and reread those books before Chain of Gold came out, so I also reread The Infernal Devices. And then I did a whole Sarah J Maas reread. I started at Heir of Fire in the Throne of Glass series and read to the end of those books, which was I think my third time doing that. I'm a fan. And then I also reread the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So did a lot of rereading this year. Over the summer I reread some of my favorite contemporary books as well. So all of the books that I'm ranking are ones that I read for the first time in 2020. There are a few books that I didn't include in this, like a self-help book. It was that kind of year. Some novellas I read, that sort of thing. So you will not be seeing all 74 books that I've read this past year. My goal recently has been to reach 75 books, and I think I'm gonna be able to do that by the new year. So I'm very proud of myself. The most books I have ever read in a year was 55. And that was back when I was in grade 9, and that was back before my life got really busy, and it just got busier and busier year after year from there. So it's been nice to slow down a bit and read more, and now I've read 20 more books than I've ever read in a year. So very proud of myself. I'm glad I have been exposed to so many new authors and different genres this past year, and I'm hoping that in 2021 I will continue to do that, to explore new books. My laptop is literally about to explode. Oh my gosh, you're gonna see my little baby hairs this whole video. I'm so sorry. So on this rank we have all-time fave at the very top, which is just an all-time fave. I read several books this year that I instantly was like, this is one of my favorite books of all time. So I feel like that might be rare. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just so used to rereading the same stuff. I don't know. Next up we have Still Vibing. I honestly tried to make these sound like me because this is my tier rank. It's like we still vibing with it, you know? Basically I'm obsessed, but like you're not at the top of the tier. Then we have A Good Time, because aside from a fun time, that is a phrase that I use quite often to describe books. That's kind of like, it wasn't the best book, but I had a good time. There it is. Then we have Not For Me. Not necessarily a bad book, just not my cup of tea. And at the very bottom we have No, but with a heart, because these are just my opinions. It doesn't mean it's a bad book, it just means that it was absolutely not my book. But my opinions are not always valid, and that's just some tea for you. Alright, let's give this a go. First up we have Landline by Rainbow Rowell. The only reason I picked up this book is because I heard that characters from Fangirl had like a little moment in it. When I say a little moment, it's a little moment, but it still made the entire book for me. This was one of my first ever adult contemporary books, but it has a fantastical element to it, which was really fun. I'm gonna put it under A Good Time because it wasn't one of my favorite books ever, but like the fangirl content, stunning. Then we have Casey West's P.S. I Like You. This is the only Casey West book that did not come out this year that I had not yet read, simply because my library didn't have it. I love Casey West books because they are just super lighthearted and a fun time. They're not of much substance, so I'm also going to put this one in A Good Time. I feel like me making this tier titled A Good Time, it's gonna work against me because I will describe all of these books as a good time. Then we have Casey West's Moment of Truth. This is her 2020 release, and I also thoroughly enjoyed this one. It was just so cute, like all of her books, and it was also a good time. This tier is going to be thick. Then we have the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. If you don't know, even though I talk about it in pretty much every single video since October, I read the first few books back when I was in elementary school, and then for some reason I just didn't continue on. It's not that I didn't like them, I just never picked up the other books. And so this year, because of the Percy Jackson read-along, I was like, now is my time. And was it ever my time? I'm obsessed with these books. Like, I literally feel like the high school and middle school version of myself whenever I think about Percy Jackson. Like, my inner fangirl just pops out. So this became an all-time fave. and I have no shame. Then we have Christina Forrest's I Wanna Be Where You Are. This was a highly anticipated book for me, and unfortunately it just wasn't my favorite. It's branded as young adult, and the characters definitely are of the young adult age. However, the writing style I just felt was a bit on the younger side, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. It was still very cute, but just not quite my book. Then we have A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which was the group book for
Team Yellow
in the Disney Channel Games readathon. And of course I read it because I'm competitive. It took me a while to get into this book, but once I was in it, I was there. I am currently making my way through the second book in the saga, and I'm really enjoying it. I think this is gonna be a still vibing. Then we have what I would say is definitely in my top 3, I would even say my top 2 absolute favorite books from this year. Loveless by Alice Oseman. I talk about this book in every single video. You're probably sick of it, and I don't blame you. Who wants to hear me talk about Loveless again? Not me. So I'm just gonna put it in all-time fave because that's where it deserves to live. Then we have Well Met by Jen DeLuca. It definitely has become like one of my absolute favorite contemporaries. I struggled with this book though because the diversity was so lacking in it that it was almost shocking. I know there's still a lot of work to be done in books in general, but I don't know that I've read many books where there is absolutely zero diversity of any kind. So it stands out in a not positive way because of that. So I've really struggled with this book and where to place it. I think I'm gonna put it in still vibing. If it was more inclusive, it would be a perfect book. However, it is not. Then we have Evie Dunmore's Bringing Down the Duke. Oh my gosh, this book was also just so much fun. There it is. It wasn't a good time. It was so much fun. It was my first ever historical romance, and I almost said I had a good time! Stop it. I need a stronger vocabulary. We're gonna put this one in still vibing because I really enjoyed it. It definitely wasn't one of my favorites. Do I even have to explain? I feel like the way I've titled these, it just explains it in my vocabulary. Like, that's why I titled them like that. But now I have nothing more to say. Next up is Jennifer E. Smith's Field Notes on Love, and I adored this book. It was so cute, and it was such a quick read, and I think it's definitely one of my favorites by Jennifer E. Smith, so I'm gonna put it under still vibing. Yeah, okay. Next we have Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, which was just a brilliant book. If you don't know, this is Sarah J. Maas's first ever adult fantasy. It's the first book in the Crescent City series. It's a long one. It took me a very long time to get through this book, but the second half on, I was just so captivated by the story and the characters in Sarah J. Maas fashion. There were so many twists and turns throughout the entire book. I'm really excited to see where the series goes in the other books. However, this first book was not necessarily one of my all-time favorites. I'm gonna put it in still vibing because I really loved it, but it's not quite on that Loveless level of just my entire heart and soul thinks about it rent-free all the time, you know? Then we have Tweet Cute by Emma Lord, and as in the title, this book was cute. It was really, how dare I almost say
fun again.
It was a very clever contemporary telling of this story. It involved so much social media, which was so much fun to read. I'm gonna put it in still vibing and I'm gonna stop talking. Then we have Yes, No, Maybe So by Becky Albertalli and Aisha Said, and you might be surprised to hear this is the first ever book I read by Becky Albertalli. Catherine, please don't hate me. While still being a young adult contemporary romance, it had this political stance. I thought it was really interesting. I don't read a lot about politics, like contemporary politics in young adult. I mean, I find like a lot of dystopian and fantasy novels have like politics because of the world building. However, in young adult contemporary, I just don't see that as much, so I really enjoyed reading that. Definitely wasn't one of my favorites from this past year, but it was still a very enjoyable book, so I'm going to put it in a good time. Then we have Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown, and I listened to the audiobook of this one. I'm not sure how my experience would have been different if I was reading a physical copy, but hearing the author reading her own words and her own story out loud was just so powerful and so moving. I believe Echo Brown is a slam poet, so just the way she tells stories is so impactful. This book is definitely heavy. It covers some very dark topics. If you are looking into reading it, I would definitely look up the trigger warnings first. So I'm gonna put it in still vibing. Oh, then we have Leah Johnson's You Should See Me in a Crown. I also listened to the audiobook of this book, and this was actually what really got me into listening to audiobooks over this past year. Em listened to this audiobook and she was like, it is such a good time. I'm so glad I listened to her, because after listening to this audiobook, I started listening to more audiobooks, and oh my gosh, it is such a fun, it's a different way of storytelling. That's what I'm trying to say. You Should See Me in a Crown. When I read it, I remember thinking to myself it was one of my favorite contemporary books of all time. In that young adult contemporary romance genre, it's like definitely at the top. But for like books as a whole, I don't know that it's one of my all-time favorite books ever. So we're gonna put it in Still Vibing. However, if you have not read this book and you like young adult contemporary books, you need to pick it up. It is immaculate. Wow, I need to go back to school, clearly. The next book on this list is A Perfect Escape by Suzanne Park, and while the premise is so adorable and I thought would be a good time, it was just not for me. I listened to the audiobook of this one, and I do think that impacted how I felt toward the book. My brain was going, how would you have read this differently if you were just reading it, which I feel like isn't a good sign. I wanted to like it, and this isn't to say that you won't like it. This might be my only notebook, and I still know with a heart I still love books, and yeah, that was one of the only books I read this year where I was ready to DNF it, and the only reason I didn't is because I got so far into it and I felt like I'd invested time, so just didn't, but I was prepared to DNF that book. Next is Recommended for You by Laura Silverman. I read this book in one sitting. You know in books when there's like frustrating plot and it just gets drawn out because you don't want to pick the book up because it's frustrating and then you have negative emotions? I feel like this book could have been that, but because I read it in one sitting, I got past all that frustration really quickly, so I only associate it with positive vibes. So I'm gonna put it in a good time. Then we have Christina Lauren.
Christina and Lauren? Is that how I should say it? Christina Lauren? We all know it's two people, right?
In a Holidays. This is another one I listened to on audiobook, and 100% the audiobook affected my experience in a very positive way because it was narrated by one of my favorite Broadway actors. I listened to this one so quickly. My first time listening to a book on 1.5 speed. I'm gonna use it again. I thought it was cute, okay? It was cute, and I'm gonna put it in a good time because it was a good time. Then we have Talia Hibbert's Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and don't hate me, but this book was not for me. This is another one I listened to on audiobook, and halfway through listening to it, like Scrib just said the book wasn't available anymore, and I wasn't even upset about it. Then I saw it was available again, so I finished it because once again I'd put so much time into it, I wanted to get through it, but this is another book that I was okay to DNF. Oh my gosh, I feel like that's a really unpopular opinion. Maybe it's not. I'm not as unique as I think I am. Next up we have November 9 by Colleen Hoover. I read this one recently for the Disney Channel Games Readathon, and I really liked it. I know I sound surprised, but that's because in the past I have had mixed experiences with Colleen Hoover books, but Reagan over at Ray Ray Reads recommended this book, and I'm so glad she did because I really enjoyed it. The more time that's between me having read this book and like reflecting on it, I like it more and more. I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but I feel like this is a book I actually would like to reread. So I'm gonna put it under Still Vibing. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This has been on my TBR since 2013, and I finally got to it this year, and my king, Lin-Manuel Miranda, narrates the audiobook, which also affected my experience 100%.
Because I'm theater trash.
But I feel like every person on the planet is Lin-Manuel Miranda trash. Like, how could you not be? The story itself was also just beautiful and moving. I loved it, and I think everyone should read this book. Was it an all-time fave? I loved it so much, but I don't feel the need to read it again. So I think we're gonna go under Still Vibing. Next up is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover, and I know that this is like the majority of people's favorite Colleen Hoover book, and I understand why. I am so much of like an emotional romance person. It really was not for me. And usually when I say not for me, I mean like it just wasn't my cup of tea, but like as a reader, I feel like I should have known going into this book that like anytime it's like a physical attraction draw, I'm like, okay, like that's fine, but I'd rather you connect on an emotional level. And it's not to say these characters didn't, like they 100% did, but so much of it was about the physical side that I was just like, I'm bored. please connect emotionally. The emotional content that was there, which was specifically in Miles's chapters, just shredded my heart. So it wasn't a good time because like it hurt my feelings. I'm gonna put it under a good time because just ranking wise I feel like that's where it would go, but know that I was hurt and upset, which I feel like tells you it's a good book. Like I wouldn't be upset if it wasn't. I'm gonna move on. Oh, when I say favorite books that I would reread all day every day, Red, White, and Royal Blue. An all-time fave that I'm so upset that I did not pick up before this year because I had heard so many wonderful things about it and I was like, yay, queer rep, we love to see it. But I was just like, I'll get to it when I get to it. I love it. Next we have Jasmine Guillory's The Wedding Date, another book that was so fun, lighthearted, a good time. I swear I'm not purposely trying to say these words, but I definitely wanted more of an emotional connection. I feel like this is just me. I'm not a romance reader and I know this and I'm reading the wrong books. I shouldn't be pushing myself to read romance because I know it's not my style, but like I want to like these books. And I did enjoy The Wedding Date, but once again I wanted less of the physical side and I wanted more of the character development and plot. So we're gonna put this in a good time. Then we have Crazy Rich Asians, which I have a lot of mixed feelings on. I love this movie with my entire heart and soul, and maybe because I've watched the movie several times, the book is just a totally different vibe and a totally different experience. The movie is a rom-com and the book is more tongue-in-cheek humor, which I appreciated, but it kind of caught me off guard. So it's another book that I enjoyed, but I don't see myself picking it up again, and I'm not inclined to read the rest of the trilogy. Maybe I will someday. We'll see. So we're gonna put that in a good time. Then we have Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I've only read volume 1 and volume 2, but oh my, the way I love Nick and Charlie. Still vibing. Next we have Becoming by Michelle Obama. It's Michelle Obama, what more can I say? Michelle Obama deserves more than a good time. We're still vibing. And then of course we have Cassandra Clare's Chain of Gold, and I loved this book. I loved the characters so much.
I'm going to put it under still vibing.
Next is Emily Henry's Beach Read, which is another book that surprised me because I thought it was gonna be just a lighthearted romance. It was a pleasant surprise. So I'm gonna put it under a good time because once again, I feel like, I don't know, it's not that romance isn't for me, I'm just so specific with my romance, and Beach Read definitely falls closer to like the romance that I'm into. Then we have Arusha and The End of Time, and I just didn't enjoy this book and I feel kind of bad about it. I thought when I was reading it, it's because I'm not into middle grade, but after having read Percy Jackson, I know that that is not true. It's just the book is absolutely not for me. I feel like it's a sin to put it under no. That's where it's gonna go. I'm so sorry, Arusha. I feel bad for the character. I know she's fictional, but like I feel mean. That's a child. Fictional, she's fine. Then we have Jasmine Guillory's The Proposal, which I enjoyed quite a bit more than The Wedding Date. There was more plot to it. There was more character development. I'm gonna put it under still vibing. Next up is Kristen Chenoweth's book, A Little Bit Wicked, I think is what it's called. I listened to the audiobook of this one back in May. I had a good time, and that's that. Love Kristen Chenoweth. Then we have Again But Better by Christine Riccio. This is another book that I really wanted to enjoy because I love Christine. I love her videos. Honestly, Christine's booktube channel is what got Em and I into making booktube videos back when we were in middle school / high school. So much love for Christine, so much respect for her. This book just was not for me. The writing style is just not what I vibe with. Similarly, Don't Ask Me Where I'm From by Jennifer De Leon was also just not for me. I feel like with the majority of the books that are in not for me, and no, it's all about the writing style. It's just not my vibe. Next up is the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. Basically a continuation of my love for Percy Jackson. The original Percy Jackson series I feel like I'm just like obsessed with, whereas the Heroes of Olympus I love so much. They totally have my entire heart, but they're not quite at that all-time favorite level, so I'm gonna put them with still vibing. It's in the company of Sarah J Maas and Cassandra Clare, so you know that I loved it. Then of course we have Beartown by Fredrik Backman. If you want to hear me talk about this book, go watch the 2020 superlatives video. I have so much love for this book, and I think if you can go into it with the trigger warnings in place and know that you can safely read this book, I feel like everyone should read it. It's just so impactful. Yeah, definitely an all-time fave. Next is Paper Girls, the graphic novel.
Please don't hate me.
No, do you know what? I just read the second one and I did really like the second one. I was gonna put the first one under not for me, but the second one I really vibed with, so I'm gonna put it under a good time and say that's volume 1 and volume 2. Then we have the other graphic novel I read this year, Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell, and I loved it. I love Rainbow Rowell's writing. As you know, I read Fangirl
every single year.
So this one is going to go under a good time. And finally, we have Farah Heron's The Chai Factor. She is a Canadian writer, so this book took place in Toronto and it made my Canadian heart oh so very happy. This is a contemporary adult romance, so going into it, I knew it was an adult romance. I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of character growth and plot. It had all the stuff I love. So this one is going to go under Still Vibing. There it is, my books of 2020. I don't think I have any regrets. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below what were some of your all-time favorite books that you read this year. I'm always looking for book recommendations. I am sending so much love and good vibes to you always. I hope you're taking care. I hope you're happy and healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye.